Something just changed at Logify, and it's worth knowing about. So before I get into today's episode, I want to take a moment to talk about Logify, because they just went through something that's worth mentioning. They recently did a full rebrand. Not just a new logo and colour, but a real rethink of what they're building and why. Their whole positioning has shifted to this: minimum hassle, maximum independence. The idea being that hosts should spend less time managing the business and more time actually running it, without handing control over to the platforms to do it for them. What's coming out of that is interesting. This summer they're launching an AI co-host that handles guest communication around the clock. Messages across Logify, WhatsApp and iMessage, with you approving anything that needs a real answer. They're also integrating directly with ChatGPT, so travellers will be able to discover and book properties through AI without going through a platform at all. And they're rebuilding their pricing engine to update rates automatically based on live market data. On top of that, the core stuff is still there. Channel Manager, direct booking website with 0% Logify commission, automated messaging, housekeeping tools, one dashboard for everything. It's a company that's clearly thinking about where hosting is actually going, not just where it is right now. Really worth a look if you've been thinking about getting proper systems in place. This is the Vacation Rental Success Podcast, keeping you up to date with news, views, information and resources on this rapidly changing short-term rental business. I'm your host, Heather Bayer, and with 25 years of experience in this industry, I'm making sure you know what's hot, what's not, what's new, and what will help make your business a success. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Vacation Rental Success Podcast. This is your host Heather Bayer, and as ever I'm super excited to be back with you once again. As I record this, I'm just a few days away from heading over the pond to the UK for a lovely visit to family and also to speak at the Scale AI conference. And if you're in UK and you're thinking about going there, I'll put a link in the show notes for you to go and grab your seat and come to the very first full day on AI in the short-term rental business. Anyhow, I noticed when I booked my tickets that although there are a few empty seats, just a few empty seats, the row that was completely empty was row 13. And I've never really been one for superstition, so I can usually snag myself a window seat if I go to 13A or 13F, and will quite often get an empty middle seat as well. That's the power of superstition. So I want to start off today with a quick question. What do you think of when you hear the number 666? If you're like most people, there's probably some vague sense of unease. There's a cultural association with something a little ominous. And that's exactly why I wanted to do this episode at this number. This is VRS666. Because I think we sometimes bring that same uneasy, superstitious energy to AI. We sense that something's lurking, that if we make one wrong move, things could go badly wrong. And so we might hold back, or we might rush in without thinking, or copy what somebody else is doing, and just hope for the best. So today, I'm going to name the beast. Not AI itself, because, quite honestly, AI is not the problem. The problem is the very human patterns we bring to implementing it. The shortcuts we're taking and the things we skip and the assumptions we make. The things we hear every day. We see and hear on media and social channels. And I want to give those patterns a proper framework because I think naming them is the first step to avoiding them. So I'm calling this the 7 deadly sins of AI in your short-term rental business. I want to tell you where some of what you'll hear today comes from. If you haven't got Brooke Pfautz's book, Vacation Rental Secrets, which is a collection of 500 mistakes that property managers made, gathered from interviews with 50 experienced operators, you should head over to Amazon right now. Each of them, and that includes me, was asked the same 10 questions, and the answers were sorted in 2 categories. strategy, team, technology, processes, and a lot more. And I've done podcast recordings about this in the past and spoken to Brooke. But just recently, I've been reading through it again. And what strikes me most is how consistent the patterns are. The same mistakes appear again and again, independently from operators across really different markets and different business sizes. And a significant number of those patterns map almost perfectly onto what I'm seeing happening now with AI adoption. So this episode draws on that, and it draws on my own conversations with property managers over the past couple of years. So they're not abstract ideas. They're recognisable. They're named patterns and things that experienced operators have been honest enough to call out in themselves. And you'll probably, as I go through this, you will recognise so many of them. So all I'm doing today is showing you where those same patterns show up in the context of AI. So let's talk about them, and more importantly, what to do instead. So before we get into the sins themselves, I want to spend a minute on the number, because I did some exploration when I was thinking about whether I do an episode 666 at all. Do you know how many podcasters avoid that? Those that have been around a long time and they've got into the 600s and they start thinking about, should I do an episode 666? They're probably the ones that also don't do an episode 13. But anyway, I'm doing it, and I wanted to share what I learned about it. Because the fear of the number 666 is so embedded in culture, there's actually a clinical name for it. So here goes. It's hexacosio, hexiconta, hexaphobia. That's all one word. And yes, I did practice saying that several times before recording this. And the phobia is real enough that when the 6th of the 6th, 2006 came around, some people actually genuinely avoided getting married that day, and it was a very poor day for weddings, certainly across North America. Ronald and Nancy Reagan changed their Bel Air address from 666 St. Cloud Road to 668. And Route 666 in New Mexico was renumbered to Route 491 in 2003, partly because of the sign theft that kept happening. Thank you, Wikipedia. But the interesting thing is, if you go back to the original source, it's that 666 in the book of Revelation is described as the number of mankind, not of the devil. It's of humanity. It's that imperfect number that falls short of the divine perfection of 777. So 666 is the number of our limitations and our tendencies to fall short. Isn't it amazing what you can learn if you spend a little time on AI? So I think that's exactly the right frame for today. The 7 deadly sins of AI are not the sins of AI. They are the sins of us. They're the sins of our human tendencies to rush and to copy and to take shortcuts and to avoid all that uncomfortable work that often has to come before the magic happens. AI just makes those tendencies visible faster and at a greater scale. So let's name them. You know the 7 deadly sins, so I'm going to call out each one of them and relate each one to how we are dealing with AI. So the first sin is gluttony. And in the world of AI, it looks like this. You've got a PMS, you've got a separate AI tool for guest messaging, another one for pricing, a third for review responses, a fourth for social media. Maybe, if you've got some clever developer in the back, you've got a couple of Zapier automations holding the bits of it all together. And each tool has its own login, its own interface, its own settings. So I spoke recently with a property manager who was genuinely proud of his tech stack. He walked me through all of it, and it took him 20 minutes just to open everything. When I asked about whether the tools talk to each other, he laughed and he said, that's next year's problem. It isn't next year's problem. It's costing him time right now, every single day, in things like login friction, in the information that doesn't sync, in the team members who have to check multiple platforms before they can answer one guest inquiry. I think of it as the 5 login morning. By the time you've opened everything you need to handle a single task, half the morning's gone. But this isn't a new pattern. Long before AI, experienced operators were making the same observation about their general tech stacks. One property manager described it memorably as death by 1,000 subscriptions, the creeping accumulation of tools that each looked like a good idea individually, but collectively became a management burden. And now they're said simply, too much software. Simpler is better. Too many platforms create confusion and operational inefficiency. And AI hasn't changed this dynamic. It's just made it worse. It's intensified it because now there's AI tools for everything and they're appearing faster than anyone can properly evaluate them. So the thing about gluttony in this respect is that each individual tool looks like progress. More tools, more capability. But capability that doesn't integrate isn't capability, it's overhead. And there's a financial side too. A typical accumulation of AI and SaaS subscriptions could add up to several $100s, maybe thousands a month, often for tools that are only being used at a fraction of their potential. So what's the antidote to gluttony? It's not fewer tools by default. It's intentional selection. It's before adding something new, asking yourself, what specific problem does this solve? Does it integrate with what I already have? Can my team actually use it? And if an existing tool in your stack has an AI feature you haven't explored yet, that's almost worth investigating before you buy something separate. So there's gluttony. The second is pride. And in the context of AI, pride shows up as a belief that because AI can handle your guest communication, it can rewrite your listing copy. It can take your review responses and create some sentiment analysis. Perhaps you don't need to bring yourself to those interactions anymore. And I want to share something I heard not long ago. A property received a review that said roughly, the house was beautiful, but I felt like I was talking to a robot the entire time. There was no warmth, no personality, just efficiency. I'm giving it 3 stars. That was a booking that didn't come back. That manager had decided that a fully automated guest communication system was a sign of operational sophistication. You see this on LinkedIn all the time, people talking about how they've gone automated. And I suppose if you think operational sophistication in a narrow sense, it actually is. The messages were going out on time, every question was being answered, nothing fell through the cracks, but the guest experienced something that felt mechanical and it just didn't match the warmth of the property itself. And the result was a review that no operational efficiency can compensate for. So when you're thinking about hospitality, it isn't a side consideration. For those of us in this industry, trust and the human relationship with guests is the whole point. We talk about this all the time. AI should be serving that, not replacing it. A framework I find useful is thinking in rough thirds. About 70% of your guest communication should be human-led, with AI playing a supporting role. It drafts, it suggests, it summarizes. About 20% can be AI generated with a human reviewing it before it goes out. And maybe 10%, things like confirmation emails, arrival time reminders, post-checkout logistics. They can be fully automated because those messages aren't where the relationship lives. The specific numbers aren't what matters. What matters is that you're making conscious decisions about where the human touch goes, not letting it disappear by default. So sin number 3 is sloth. And it's a subtle one because it often disguises itself as progress. I hear this all the time, and this is what it looks like. You've been meaning to document your processes for years. Your check-in procedure lives in your head. Your brand voice is something you can describe, but you haven't written down. Your standard operating procedures are either outdated, they're scattered across multiple documents, they're hidden in files in a cabinet, or they don't exist. And now AI is here and you get that hope. And it's sometimes an explicit hope that AI will somehow fill in those gaps for you. I look back to my time at Cottage Link Rental Management and everything I've just said was true of where I was then. And I think if I hadn't sold the company in 2022 and I hadn't gone full-time into AI, as I clearly have now, I would still be in that same situation. And I'd probably be getting excited and maybe anticipating the fact that the AI is going to come along and fill the gaps. But it won't. What I've learned is that it won't do that. AI just amplifies what you give it. If you're going to feed it vague instructions, you'll get vague outputs. If you give it no clear picture of your business or your voice or your standards, it will produce something really generic that sounds like 1,000 other property managers. If you come to Scale AI on June the 9th, you're going to hear me talking more about this. So when we ran the first cohort of our ambassador program, I was talking to somebody who was in that program who'd been using ChatGPT for 6 months, and it just felt like it wasn't doing anything for her. And when we looked at what she was actually doing, she was just entering new prompts from scratch every time with no context, no uploaded examples, and no consistent instructions. She thought the AI was just going to figure out who she was. And I've heard this from a lot of people who are using ChatGPT who said it's got memory. It learns who I am. But it learns a lot about you that maybe you don't want it to know. If you use ChatGPT for business, you probably use it for your personal life as well. I went into ChatGPT recently as a bit of an experiment, and I haven't used it for quite some time. And I said, tell me what you know about me. And it came up with some great stuff. It knew I'd been a psychotherapist and a counselor and run multiple businesses. And it also knew that I procrastinated badly and that I play pickleball sometimes and I walk my dog, Britta. And some of those personal things are okay. I don't mind it knowing some of my personal details. But there might be other things in there. I might have gone in and said, oh, I've got this funny headache. Can you give me a diagnosis? I wouldn't be doing that, by the way. But if you are using your ChatGPT to do personal things as well as your business things, and then you're counting on it to know you so that it reflects in your business communication, something to be thinking about. So coming back to that, you can't get AI to figure out who you are if you don't explicitly tell it who you are in relation to what you want the outputs to be. So what's striking is that how many experienced operators have identified this exact problem, which is not just in AI, but in their businesses generally, long before AI was part of the conversation. Multiple managers independently, and we're going back to Brooke's book now, said variants of the same thing. SOPs lived in my head. I allowed employees to be aimless because I didn't provide any structure for them. I was the only person who knew how to do certain things, and when something went wrong or someone left, I paid for it. Or something that I said a lot over time, I don't want to employ somebody because it's going to take too long for them to get to know what I have in my head. And one manager described the trap particularly well. He said that it was always so much faster to do a small repetitive thing yourself rather than to write a procedure and teach someone else to do it. Until one day, that's all he was doing. All day, because nothing had ever properly been handed off. And it's a short-term ease, but it had created a long-term bottleneck. And AI doesn't change that trap. It just adds a new version of it. You can spend 6 months prompting an AI tool from scratch every time, getting inconsistent results and feeling like AI doesn't work. When the real problem is that you never gave the AI anything stable to work from. The work that makes AI useful, and that's documenting your processes, writing down your brand voice, creating structured prompts that reflect how your business actually operates, building skills in Claude, is not AI work. It's the foundational work that good operators should be doing anyway. AI doesn't remove that obligation. It makes it more visible, because without it, you can't get anything worthwhile out of the tool. So if you find yourself hoping that AI will create the system you've been avoiding, that's the signal to stop and build the system first. It will take a few hours. It will make every subsequent AI interaction better. And honestly, it will make your business better, regardless of AI. And I want to segue lightly into our AI Ambassador course, which is launching the next cohort on June the 15th. Because if any of this that I've been talking about is making you feel a little uncomfortable, is making you think, oh my goodness, that's me, this is the way I operate, then you need to consider coming and joining us in the new AI Ambassador course cohort, because we will go through all of this and make sure by the time you come out of the end of the 7 weeks that everything that I'm talking about today has been covered and structured and worked out. So that's a little bit of an ad for the AI Ambassador course. And if you're interested in joining us and you're wondering whether you think it's right for you, get in touch with me. We'll have a chat and see if it is. What if the admin just ran itself? If you've been in the short-term rental business for more than 5 minutes, you know the admin load is real. Updating calendars across platforms, responding to guest questions at all hours, coordinating turnovers, and chasing down the things that fell through the cracks. It's the part of hosting nobody really talks about, but it's also the part that determines whether this stays something you love or becomes something that you resent. Logify is built to take most of that off your plate. One dashboard, channel manager, automated guest messaging, housekeeping and task management, direct booking website, unified inbox for all your properties. It's the kind of setup that lets your operation run without you manually touching every piece. And this summer, Logify is launching an AI co-host, an always-on AI that handles guest messages across Logify, WhatsApp, and iMessage. You set the rules, the AI manages the communication, and you step in for anything that needs a real decision. For anyone running multiple properties or hosting alongside a full-time life, this genuinely changes what's possible. You can use code VRS20 for 20% off all yearly and bi-yearly Logify plans. The link is in the show notes. For this week only, you can get 60% off Logify's yearly and bi-yearly professional and ultimate plans with the code VRS60. So if you're interested, best to get in touch with Logify straight away. Okay, number 3. Oh no, it's number 4. Number 4. The fourth sin is wrath. And I want to be careful here because the wrath I'm talking about isn't usually anger. It's that force that comes from impatience, from deciding that the team just needs to do it now because everybody's out there talking about it without taking the time to explain why or to create the conditions for it to work. What I've seen happen more than once is this, that a manager discovers AI, they get genuinely excited, implement a new tool or a new way of working, and then get baffled when the team doesn't adopt it. Or worse, when they adopt it superficially and then find workarounds. I've done this. I find new tools. I get really excited. I want to implement them and then talk about them. But what I haven't done is thought about how it's going to impact other people. So what those team members that you're sharing with are often thinking, because if you look around, you're probably going to see that deer in the headlights look. And whether they say it or not, they're saying, am I being replaced? Is this a sign that you don't trust my judgment anymore? Are you going to evaluate my work against what the AI produces? And these are really reasonable fears. And if you're going to answer all of them with, no, don't worry, without engaging genuinely with that concern, the adoption's going to fail. People don't use tools they don't trust. And they don't trust tools that were introduced as a mandate rather than a conversation. One experienced operator put it about as plainly as it can be put. Being too tech-focused with a team that isn't techie is a mistake. Most of the time, your team is going to be nowhere near as excited about the new technology you want to roll out as you are. And in fact, they might secretly hate it. And the harder you push, the harder they quietly push back. This isn't an AI problem. Operators have been observing this pattern with every new technology rollout for years. What changes with AI is the stakes, because AI touches how people communicate, how they write, how their work's evaluated. And that's way more personal than a new PMS or a new scheduling tool. The fear of being replaced is really closer to the surface. The approach that works is finding someone on the team who is already curious, already experimenting, already showing some enthusiasm, and making them the hero, giving them time and permission to go deeper, having them share what they're learning in team meetings, building excitement around small wins, rather than announcing a system-wide rollout. This is what an AI ambassador is. What I just said is the description of that cheerleader, that enthusiastic guru that you've got in your workplace. And it could be somebody on your maintenance team or your cleaning team or your reservations team. You don't know until you go and try and find out. Because the goal is to make AI feel like something the team's doing together, not something being done to them. So this is a leadership question, not a technology question. So sin number 5 is envy. And this is probably the most common one I see, because the short-term rental community is genuinely generous about sharing what's working. But here's where I see there may be a problem coming in. You hear that a 40 property management company is getting great results from a particular AI workflow. Maybe you hear somebody on this podcast who's doing these things and they've got agents running everywhere so that they can implement more hospitality creativity. And so you implement the same workflow, or you try to, except your portfolio is 5 properties, your market's completely different, your team is smaller, and the tool they recommended costs more than your current entire software budget. 3 months later, you really resent the recommendation. What works for someone else's business reflects their specific situation, their own market, the capabilities that their team have, their guest demographics, their existing systems, their brand positioning. So you've got to see it as something different. You see it as a starting point, not a prescription, not looking at something and saying, oh my gosh, I really want that and I'm going to adopt it here. Because before adopting anything you've seen anywhere else, it's worth pausing on a few questions. What specific problem am I trying to solve? Do I have the foundation, going back to the beginning here, the documented processes and the trained team to actually support this? Does it fit my business at its current size and stage? And can I actually measure whether it's working? So templates and workflows borrowed from other operators are genuinely useful as inspiration and as starting frameworks. The people that you're looking at and perhaps envying because they are where you want to be, they've worked at it. They've got their foundations in place. They have trained their teams. They've got everything documented. So these starting frameworks need to be adapted, not transplanted into your business. Your business is your business. It's not theirs. Your guests are not their guests. Your owners are not their owners. So before you want to take on what somebody else is doing and copy it, really think about your own position in the business and how translatable or transplantable that is. So sin number 6, I'll remember this from my childhood. 6th sin is greed. Not greed in the conventional sense, but the kind that shows up as expectation. Specifically, the expectation that AI should produce significant results immediately with minimal investment of time or effort to learn how to use it properly. What do we call it? Instant gratification. And the pattern I see often goes like this. Someone watches a short video, they try the tool a couple of times, they find the outputs are disappointing, they're inconsistent, and then they conclude that AI isn't really for them, or it doesn't live up to the hype. And people talking about this in social media platforms all the time. AI's rubbish. It doesn't work for me. It's a mess. It hallucinates. But what they've actually found out is that AI, like any skill, has a learning curve. And the first month of working seriously with any AI tool is mostly discovery. It's about understanding what it can and can't do. It's experimenting with prompts. It's learning how to give it context. It's understanding what context actually means. Then months 2 and 3 are refinement. Month 4 onwards is where you start to see reliable time-saving results. And from there, those results compound. And I do know that from how I'm working with AI, that it changes every week. So you could say, what's the point of spending 4 months learning AI if it's going to be changing? You're learning the foundations. You're learning to put your foundations in place because they don't change. That's your business. And as you're learning a new tool, you can apply those foundations to that tool. And if the tool changes or if something radically happens that you're going to dispose of that tool, you are going to have that foundational knowledge stored and ready to go with anything new. And you are learning along the way. Because although new platforms come along, they're all foundationally identical. So the comparison I find useful is thinking about onboarding a new team member. You wouldn't expect a new hire to be fully productive in week 1. You hopefully invest in training. You give them time to get familiar with how you operate. You provide feedback and you adjust. You sit them alongside a peer and get them to follow along. And AI requires a similar approach, except that once you've built good prompts and good processes around it, it scales in a way that a human team member can't. And the investment required is not enormous. It could be a serious month of learning, of experimenting, of watching tutorials and building and refining prompts. And it puts you in a position to benefit significantly. Because the operators who are getting the most out of AI right now aren't the ones who adopted it earliest. They're the ones who took the time to learn it properly. And I know that this time of year is not the best time to begin adopting and implementing something new. But it is a great time to learn how it works, to learn how it's going to work in your business and get that really basic knowledge before you then go on to the next stage, which is deciding which tools you're going to use. And yes, along the way, you're going to experiment. I spent lots of time in ChatGPT, but I've experimented with Gemini, with Perplexity. I spent a lot of time with Notebook LM. And in the first cohort of the Ambassador program, I talked about Notebook LM a lot. In the next cohort, I probably won't be mentioning it much at all. I'll be talking about Claude, because that is a space that I think people should be in right now. So it's understanding that you don't necessarily have to have everything right now, because things will change and you may want to move from one thing to another, but get your foundations in place first. So sin number 7. This is the one I never understood really as a kid. I'm sure lots of people are the same. Sin number 7, of course, is lust. And if I'm being honest, this is the one I've had to work hardest to avoid myself when I'm looking at it in the context of short-term rentals and AI, because every week there is a new tool. There's a new feature. There's a new model out that's supposed to be a step change from the previous one. As I'm recording this, Opus 4.8 has just come out in Claude, and it doesn't seem long since they were touting Opus 4.7 and whether it was better than the latest version of Sonnet and whether you should use Haiku. And if you are sitting there with deer in the headlights look at the moment, I quite understand, because I'm using all the expressions and terms that you would learn if you went to do that foundational work. So yes, there's a new tool every week. A new model, it's supposed to be a step change from the previous one. If you're genuinely interested in AI, and if you find it as fascinating as I do, it's very easy to spend a lot of time going down those rabbit holes, exploring and testing and thinking about new things instead of going deeper with the tools you already have. So while I'm looking at Opus 4.8, I'm still very happy with the Sonnet version I'm using. And maybe at some point when I've got a couple of hours to spare, when there's nothing else on my agenda, I might go look at 4.8 and see if I should be using it. And this isn't a personality flaw unique to AI enthusiasts. We called it shiny object syndrome, and it's something that, going back to Vacation Rental Secrets, Brooke's book, that shiny object syndrome was something that so many experienced operators flagged as one of their most costly recurring mistakes long before AI appeared. Multiple managers cited it independently as a pattern that cost them focus, time, and in some cases money. And I would say in many cases money, because I know that was the case for me. I would jump on the latest new thing before the current thing we've been working on had been properly embedded. So the advice that came back again and again was the same. Stay focused on your core business. If it's not a genuine, yes, this is going to work for us, it's probably a no. And AI is right now the shiniest object in the room. And that makes the pull toward it stronger than usual. And the need for that discipline is more important than ever. And I see this pattern constantly in property managers who are interested in AI, but they're not yet getting strong results from it. They're using half a dozen tools at a surface level, and they're constantly evaluating whether to switch to something new, always at the beginning of a learning curve. I've been there. And you could say you've got breadth without depth. But the operators getting the most out of AI right now have made a different choice. They've picked one primary tool, which is usually ChatGPT or Claude, unless you're in the Google Workspace environment or maybe in the Microsoft environment. But generally, it's ChatGPT or Claude. And those who are getting the most out of AI right now, they've committed themselves to understanding it properly. They've built out their skills and their projects. They've tested them. They've refined them. They've built workflows around them. And they've given their team time to get genuinely comfortable. And then, from that foundation of real competence, they then evaluate whether there's something new worth adding. And one thing to say is these major platforms aren't going to go away anytime soon. ChatGPT and Claude are very competitive. They're always adding new things. One will sit over the other for a few weeks, and then ChatGPT adds ChatGPT images, and then Claude adds Opus 4.8, and then next week it'll be something new. So the discipline is pick one tool. Give it 90 days of genuine effort. Build your expertise, and only then decide whether something else is worth making the switch. Mastery, if you're going for mastery, it just compounds. Whereas moving from tool to tool means you're just always starting over. So there we are, we've named the 7 sins: gluttony, pride, sloth, wrath, envy, greed, lust, all very human, all very recognisable. And what I want to say about them, all of them, is that they're not character flaws. They're just patterns that arise naturally when something new and genuinely complex arrives in your working life faster than you have time to process it. The pace of AI development has been extraordinary. Nobody has had sufficient time to figure this out thoughtfully. So we are all, to some degree, improvising. I talk to AI enthusiasts every single day, sometimes for the podcast, sometimes in mastermind groups or on forums. And we all say the same. We're all improvising. We're all taking it as it comes. But there are some things that give me confidence, and I hope it will give you some as well, is that these patterns aren't new. This is why I wanted to bring in these operators that I was reading about when I reread Vacation Rental Secrets, because those operators have been naming them and learning from them for decades. Those managers who shared their mistakes in that collection weren't talking about AI, because when that book was written, AI was out there, of course, but it wasn't in our framework of working as it is now. So they were talking about tech stacks and about team dynamics, process documentation, and the temptation of everything new that came along. And they came out the other side knowing what to do differently. So we have that advantage. We can learn from what they already figured out and apply it here. So awareness matters. Once you can name the pattern, you can make a different choice. If you're accumulating tools without integrating them, step back and audit what you actually use. If you've let AI replace the warmth in your guest communications, find one place to put the human voice back. If you've been hoping AI will create the systems you've been avoiding building, start with one process, write it down properly, and see what becomes possible. It's experimental. Enjoy the experimentation, but do it. I don't like to say baby steps, because I certainly don't do it in baby steps. I've probably got experimentation going on in multiple projects at the same time. But do it incrementally. Wait until you finish something before you move on to the next. If you've mandated a tool without bringing your team along, have one honest conversation about what you're trying to achieve and why it matters to them. If you've copied someone else's AI strategy without checking if it fits, revisit it against your own situation. If you've given up because the results weren't immediate, decide to give it one proper month of serious effort. And if you're chasing everything new, choose one tool, close the browser tabs, and go deep into it. None of this is complicated. It's just a kind of intentional, grounded approach that makes any significant change actually work. So, there you have it. Episode 666 is not about fear. It's about facing the thing clearly. Because the beast in this industry isn't AI. It's our very human tendency to rush, to take shortcuts, to copy someone else's work because it looks like they're achieving quick results, to expect magic without doing the work. AI doesn't introduce those tendencies, it just makes them more visible and way more consequential. But when we approach AI with intention, with honesty about what we're actually doing and why, and with some patience for what the learning curve is, it really does deliver. I talk about it being a magic solution, but it really isn't a magic solution. It's a capable assistant that gets better the more you invest in working with it properly. That, I think, is worth 666 episodes and a little bit of superstition. If today's episode gave you something useful to think about, I'd love to hear about it. You can find me at vacationrentalformula.com. You can find me on my Substack, which is heather.bayer@substack.com. Find me on LinkedIn. All those links are in the show notes anyway. And if you're interested in going deeper with AI in your short-term rental business in a very structured way, talking through all the things that I've been talking about today, our ambassador program is open for the cohort 2 in June the 15th. Details are in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here. Take care. Happy hosting. Look forward to seeing you again. It's been a pleasure as ever being with you. If there's anything you'd like to comment on, then join the conversation on the show notes for the episode at vacationrentalformula.com. We'd love to hear from you, and I look forward to being with you again next week.